Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Bio. I'm Nicolette Lazarus, founder of Womanship. And in this series, we meet the women behind the wisdom, the ones who help us heal, grow, and make sense of this beautiful mess of being a woman. These aren't prepped panels or podcasts. They're honest, unscripted conversations with wonderful and very human women that connect the dots between who they are, what they do, and why it matters. So today I am joined by the amazing Dr. I always get that wrong. How do I
Große, yeah.
also, okay. And she is a biologist coach and the founder of the Cyclical CEO. Her story moves from the world of science to the world of strategy and the strategy of who we are as women. She spent years studying biology at the cellular level and now looks at women's hormonal rhythms and thinks that that might just be the missing link in terms of how we lead and live. So she helps ambitious women scale their businesses without burning out by working with their cycles, not against them. Julia, welcome. It's so lovely to have you here.
It's so lovely to be here, Nicolette. Hi.
So, as you know, I am a fan of connections, the type you make networking or at parties. And I love starting with the first question. How do you remember us first meeting?
So, fun fact, we have never met in person. I found a speaker application page for the health weekend. And I was like, yeah, they need my expertise. And I applied, but it was way too late. And then you sent me an invitation to join the platform. And I think we spent quite a few Mondays and the We Rise starting our week together.
The entrepreneurial sessions, yeah, it's a really nice way to start the week. And we've had some amazing discussions in those. It's really great to have you as part of our Womanship platform and one of our professionals. So I'm going to keep on the same idea of connections. And with the work I've done with Womanship and work on myself, I realized that we are all a sum of connections, of past experiences, of past relationships, of past interactions that bring us to where we are today. So my first question is always, what makes you the woman that you are today?
I think it has been a lot of little steps. So I did a lot of living abroad. And I think one of the reasons why I did move abroad and study abroad so much was because I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. So I'm from East Germany, and they reunited into the whole of Germany when I was about 6. So that's when a lot of my family around were like losing their jobs and moving to West Germany. And I think it was like, yeah, I like traveling, not just inside the country, but far away. That actually made me curious about other places, other people.
So tell me a bit more about your childhood.
I don't really remember that much, but we moved when I was about 10 because my mom was a teacher and suddenly the subject she was teaching didn't exist anymore. And then she became like a handcraft teacher and had to study again to be a computer teacher. So we moved not that far away, but we had to move. And then yeah, basically everyone around us got divorced. My parents got divorced. It was just my mom and my brother. And he's a younger brother. So I think he kind of like did all the things that younger brothers do, but he was really good in getting caught. So I think one of the things that happened was like, okay, I would like to do all those things, but he's always getting in trouble. So let's not put too much burden on my mom. Let's just figure it out by myself. Let's not, let's stick to the rules because he's breaking them all and gets caught. So maybe breaking rules is also not a good idea. But
It's
for a
funny.
long time, I was sticking to the rules.
It's funny how I hear this a lot from elder siblings who are women in terms of they didn't necessarily break the rules, they tended to do the straight and narrow. It seems to be quite a theme running through in terms of how we behave.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't really have a lot of friends who are older sisters that could actually, they're all like, I'm the little sister, I have a big brother. And I'm like, I have a little brother. And
So tell me about that time in your life going through, because it's quite a change, I guess, when your parents do separate and split up. How was that? How did you experience that as a child and emotionally, for example?
So they were fighting a lot, and I don't think I'm someone who likes to fight and argue for the sake of arguing. So it was basically we stayed with my mom, my brother, and I, and then we had every second weekend with my dad. And at some point, I was like, I don't want to come anymore. I just rather stay at home. So I don't know what that did to the whole thing. And I think it was also like that's how my mom tells it that my dad's side, they don't like women or girls. She's like, yeah, they don't know what to do with a girl. So my grandma, she was they were fleeing in 45 from Bohemia or what it is. And then well they were refugees, and then apparently they better know how to deal with boys. So that was her excuse. And I
Okay.
was like, yeah, maybe she's right. So instead of going fishing or, doing what the guys do, I'd rather not go.
So how did that then play out in terms of how old were you when they got divorced?
I think I was like 13 or 14.
Okay. And how does that do you think that's impacted you now in any way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the story goes further that my dad died when I was 17.
Okay.
So when we were with him every other weekend, we didn't have a lot of contact with my grandparents. So then after he passed away, they were back in our lives, but sometimes it felt like a bird, like I don't know, like a chore, and it was like, yeah, they're your grandparents, you go visit them twice a year, even if you're living somewhere else, you'll need to make space for them. Um, I don't know. That was kind of like, figuring out some people I wanna hang out with and some people I'll hang out with because I think it's expected.
So what were you like as that teenager then growing up?
I think I was very introverted and I didn't have a lot of friends. I was bullied at school, so because my mom was a teacher, at least that was the excuse, I don't know. So I was actually at the point where I didn't have a lot of friends, just like maybe through some hobbies, which was probably also easy to decide then to, after high school when everyone is like, where are you going to study? Maybe I'll go there and then we're together. I'm like, no, I can go wherever I want because I don't care who goes where. I'll just sign up for the furthest place I can go.
And what were you studying? What did you decide to do and why?
Why? I think I wanted to be a marine biologist because I watched Free Willy a couple too many times. Like, seriously, it was like, I wanna, play with whales, basically. And then, that was the reason why I studied biology, and then in one of the very first lectures that we took, the professor was like, "I know 95% of you are here because they wanna study whales. Maybe one of you is gonna do it, everyone else is gonna do something else."
So where did you go and study then? Where did you go to study biology?
In Germany, at the Baltic Sea. So it's like a 4 or 5-hour drive away. So it's, from American standards, I lived in the US between high school and university. So like a 5-hour drive is like you do that in a day and go back. I think for a lot of my classmates, it was like, no, that's too far away.
So
But it
before you
was
went to university then, so tell me about the US experience.
I finished school and I wanted to go to New Zealand, but back then I think they didn't have the work and travel where you just had to pay for a flight ticket. So basically, in order to go to New Zealand, it was way too expensive. So I was like, okay, everyone is going to the US. I'm going to the US. So a couple weeks after graduation, I like started as an au pair. So for everyone who doesn't know what that is, it's like basically a 24/7 babysitter, even though people are not allowed to work 24/7. They live with a family and they're taking care of their kids. So I had a family lined up with 2-year-old twins, just a single mom, 4 dogs in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And I was like, okay, let's go and see. And it was very crazy times because it was right 9/11. So it was crazy and I couldn't really work with that family. So I switched families, I moved someplace else. And it was, well, I was earning my own money. It wasn't a lot, but I was earning my own money. I could afford things. I drove around with a car. I had to, babysit a 2-year-old. So I was like, maybe that's nothing I want to do in real life for like the next 10 years. Like, if you can borrow some kid for 40 hours a week, you'll very quickly decide if you want to have one anytime soon. And yeah, I did a lot of traveling in that year too. So
It's amazing the responsibility, I think, that they put on very young au pairs to look after a whole life at just age, what, 18, 19?
yeah, yeah, I was just 18. And the first family, they had 2-year-old twins. And then you have to go to the store and buy something. And then one runs away. What are you going to do with the other one, right? So do you chase that one? I think you get also very good in problem solving. Like that's the first swim or sink.
Hmm. So, as well as Free Willy in terms of helping you think about biology, was there, looking back, are there other moments where in childhood where your early life or experiences drove your curiosity? Were you always interested in how things work?
A little bit, but I really did wanna play with whales. I mean, I was out in nature a lot. We had like, the forest behind our house. There was not a lot of trains, there was not a lot of cars. Our parents basically let us out after lunch and we came back for dinner. And they didn't really care where we went. It was
So,
very adventurous. And
but it's
maybe being a marine biologist is also like, a little bit adventurous.
what actually happened on your path with studies then in terms of the type of biology that you worked with?
I so I studied there was a very strict curriculum for the first 4 semesters, and then I was like, "Okay, how do I get on one of those ship cruises?" Which are working cruises, they're not like fun cruises, they're working cruises, but there is a few opportunities for students, and I remember I was supposed to be in a practical, and then the professor just decided, "No, I'm not," and that actually lined me up for a student job in a lab that studies marine algae using stable isotopes. So basically, they look if the carbon molecule in wherever has 12 or 13 neutrons in it. So it's like, I don't think it gets really much tinier in what you can measure. And I started working for that group and then I just stuck with it. They took me to Vietnam twice, so they gave me my ship experience, my travel experience. I was hooked. I was like, okay, I study algae. If it's in Vietnam, then that's fine.
So, what happened next?
What happened next? So I graduated eventually, and when I came back from the US the first time, I don't know, have you ever heard of a reverse culture shock? So
Yeah.
you're cool with going somewhere and it's all new and different experiences and you like it, and then you're just being pulled back into like the old surroundings and you really miss like the other experience. So I actually decided I want to pursue a PhD in the US. So I signed up for it. I got it. I got a position. I moved to Atlanta, and I had a crappy boss.
Okay.
And actually, that was so it was cool. We also went on big expeditions there, and it didn't go very well. And I made like this little contract with myself that whenever, like, if the thought of quitting pops into my head, I'll actually think about quitting. So there I was on the ship going up the stairs, and the thought came in. I was like, maybe I should just quit. And I was like, okay, I had the deal. Let's think about it. So I talked to a few people on the ship. It was a pretty long expedition. And one of the women, she was like, yeah, you don't have to stay in a place you don't like, it's about you. And she basically gave me this permission slip that we hardly ever give ourselves. Just like, yeah, if you want to quit, quit.
That's so
That's
nice
what
in
I
terms
did.
of having that energy, because I think so often people stay in situations they're not happy with or jobs they don't enjoy because they think it's the thing to do. And it's so nice that it was another woman who said, "Yep, you have choices." So was your boss a man or a woman?
A man.
Okay.
And very like one of those passive aggressive kind of people, that doesn't really communicate, just expects. And it was like the lab was they basically invented the main method that we were using. And one of the reasons I went there was like so I can learn the method and get better at it. And then he didn't let me do it.
Okay.
So no, I'm the only one who touches those machines, that kind of stuff. Figure
And when,
something else out.
and when you talk about going on an expedition, what do you mean?
So marine scientists sometimes stay in a lab and grow algae, or they go on a kai where you put boats and get samples. But most of the samples, in order to figure out how the entire ocean works, is like we need samples from the middle of the ocean, from like 3,000 meters depth, to see who's there, what they're doing, all of that. And for that, we have research vessels. So every country has one or two. Germany, I think, has like 10-ish. The Netherlands has one.
Okay.
And someone, not me, so usually one of the big professors, they'll get funding to go, they'll write proposals to go, and then once they have that all secured, they rather not go, so they find PhD students and postdocs. And then, you have to prep it all, right? Everything needs to be on that ship, so you have to think about what you need, pack what you need, order what you need, put everything through customs, what you need. So it's basically, a lot of logistics. And then you tell the chief scientist, so it's like the head of the whole science party, what you want to do, and then they'll make a plan, who gets when, where, what. And then, once the cruise time is up, we just go wherever we want to go. That can be the North Sea, that can be in Vietnam, it was the South China Sea, or you just go to the Arctic, wherever you want to take your samples and do your studies. And then basically the ship gets you to where you want to go, and then you'll take your samples, prep them, preserve them, take them home, and then analyze them.
How long is a trip?
Well, you can do one-day trips, so they don't go very far. Usually they're about a week to 3 or 4 weeks, but there's also some that are like 2 months, 3 months. The longest I was on an expedition was 4.5 months.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, that wasn't planned.
Okay, so let's get into that a little bit more. So you quit this job in the US,
Yes.
and so what happened after this?
So I kind of said I'm wanting to leave, but I didn't really say like I'm out. I was more like, I'll try to find another position. So it was very hard in the US. I could have stayed. There's so many deadlines that I missed that I would have had to wait for an entire year and then kind of start all over again. So I was like, okay, let's just go back to Europe. And I applied for 4 different jobs in the Netherlands, Germany, and I think in Denmark. And then I got hired. So I think it was like 5 months later, I then started another PhD position in the Netherlands.
Was that the job that took you to the Arctic?
No, not
Okay.
yet. So that one took me only to the North Sea because my boss, he hired me to develop methods that no one else has used. And I think it's the NVO. They're the ones that give the funding. And they were like, yeah, but we only finance it in the North Sea. Take the Dutch research vessel, because we pay for that anyway, and test it here before we send you to some fancy places.
Okay.
So that took actually almost 5 years. And then I defended my thesis in Amsterdam, and you have to have a committee. And one of my committee members, she was from Germany. And the defense in the Netherlands is completely different than in Germany. So she was kind of complaining that I didn't give a 90-minute lecture on my topic and my findings. So she was like, why don't you come over? I want to hear more. So she invited me over 2 months later. And then I presented 60 minutes on my algae. And she was like, well, I have this lady, she's going to go on maternity leave. Don't you want to come and work for me? And I was like, okay, I don't have a job. Let's just move countries. And then I started working for her. And actually, the first thing that happened when I started working was like, yeah, you have to start packing for that Arctic trip.
So the Arctic, I mean, what is that like?
Cold. To get there was actually not that hard because they do the same cruise every year. It's a long-term monitoring station or grid. So it was basically taking someone else's papers and packing the same thing and then going there. Yeah, it was very well Germanly organized. And then basically it was a checklist that we worked off. And we went in summer the first time. You know, you miss the summer here, but it's like 2 degrees, maybe 4 degrees. It's light all the time. It's not like the sun is shining all the time. It's very foggy sometimes. But it was very nice. The ship's called, and they have the German weather service with them all the time. So at some point, the weather station guy, he was like, "Let me just tell you how horrible the weather is in Germany, so you like it even better."
So, going from being a scientist studying algae, which you did for so long, what started you to turn towards looking or walking away from that and walking into a new world, a new area?
It was actually pretty easy. So if you work in Germany in science, you can only work there for 12 years. And then you either have a permanent contract or you're not allowed to work there anymore. And it's in science, basically it's 3 or 4 year jobs. And then find another one. And once you have a new one, you still have to write up papers from the last one and you have to search for the next one. So it's basically being in between 3 jobs at the same time. And for me, I was at the point where I would have had to move away again. And back then I had like a little niece. Now she's 5. And I was like, I don't want to be, a day traveling away from home, which made it kind of easy to decide that I don't want to do science anymore and work in science. But it was very hard to figure out what to do next.
And how did that journey go? I mean, what kind of things did you explore to end up with the area that you are now? And did your scientific training help in terms of how you moved forward?
Well, for a long time, there was this idea to clean wastewater, but I realized that requires a lot of like also like financial background or something because it's very expensive. So I was like, no, I want something that I can do by myself. And I came across a program similar to the Wheel of Life that looks at all your categories. And I was like, yes, if I do that one and if I do the category of career, then I'll figure something out. I didn't. So it didn't it didn't give me the big answer, but it let me think about what am I good at. So I was good at nutrition. I lost 20 kilograms almost by changing my diet. So I'm doing a lot of biohacking and workout stuff. Not that I'm doing it, but I know a lot about it. So then I was like, let's do a nutritionist course. Like back then it was the pandemic, so no one was allowed to go anywhere. It was everything is online. So I found a nutritionist course that I took. And then also I had a lot of people doing coaching. So I also did a life coaching certification. And I was like, okay, now I have all that. Let's figure out what to do with it. And the nutritionist, at the end, we had to write a diploma thesis. So a PhD with 13 scientific publications, a 30-page document is not, it's like, yeah, I can write that in like a week or two. And then the big question was, what is the topic? And like, basically, I had to choose between, do I want to do the gut microbiome, which is very important for every lady who doesn't know it, or do I want to look more into the cycle? Because I went to a talk where someone was like, yeah, your cycle basically tells you what's wrong with your hormones. I was like, really? I didn't know that. I'm like 35 and I don't know that. So maybe there's a lot more people out there that don't know what the period is trying to tell them. So I wrote it all together and basically that's how I started out.
I think it's insane. We keep coming across the same thing over and over again of how little we know as women about our bodies. I didn't hear anything about my cycle and what maybe I was better doing at certain times of the month or what it was telling me until I was in perimenopause. I didn't even know that I should be looking at it that way. So when you talk about cycle syncing and understanding your hormonal rhythms, what does it actually mean? What are you actually helping women with and how?
So first of all, I think we all have our unique rhythm, right? Our own energy patterns and signatures. And I think the most important part is that we know ourselves. So I can give you a huge list and tell you in this part of your cycle, your energy should be like this, and you should be focusing on those kind of sports activities and this kind of food. But it's basically try and figure out what works for you. So there is now a lot of sign, or not a lot, but they start to catch up on female biology. So it's actually funny. Women in their reproductive years get excluded for a long time from all the medical trials, from all the nutrition trials, from workout trials, because they have a cycle and it has 4 phases, and that's just too complicated. Right? It made sense at some point when they were testing medicine that, let's not mess up our reproductive system until we figured out that it's sort of safe. But basically, a lot of the advice out there is tested on like 19 and 20-year-old males, because those are the ones in college that say like, here, we'll volunteer because you pay us.
There was a stat that came up, I think Dr. Louise Newson said that a lot of women have not been used in drug testing until 1994. And, the whole audience gasped and saying, okay, 1994 is not that long ago, to think of everything else that was researched before then didn't take women into account. And even now, we're still lacking on really balanced male versus female trials on things. It's quite incredible. So what you're saying about our cycles is, yes, there are things based on group data, aggregated data, that means we should be doing things in different phases of our cycle, but we are all very different. So I guess it's that you're saying. It's, yes, there's standard, but actually it's very individual as well.
Yeah, I think we should start from the nice curves that is like a combination of probably a million measurements, and go from there, but figure out like, is that really true for me? Right? And then, is that really true for me? And then what is best for me? Because I can tell you, Nicolette, you should be working out, strength training 3 times a week in on, cycle day 12, 15, and 17. But if you don't want to do it, then it's the best advice that no one's gonna implement ever.
What are the 4 phases of our cycle, and what does cycle syncing actually mean?
Okay, so I think a lot of women also track that as their menstrual phase, right? That's basically when the main thing that women know about, and that's actually when the hormones are at their lowest, because your body's like, okay, you're not pregnant, we'll just need to get rid of all our endometrium and reset basically the whole cycle. So that's where everyone's like, yeah, I'm tired, I got pain, I don't want to do anything, my energy is low. And then we'll get into the follicular phase, which is about 7 to 10 days for most of us. It's when the ovaries start ripening the egg again and make it ready for ovulation. So that's when estrogen rises, when we usually get lots of ideas and planning. It's like the spring season, right? Where finally we're out of this winter depression and we want to do things. We don't really plan things. We'll just go. We'll have a lot of energy. Then starts to ramp up. Then we'll get into the ovulation phase where the egg is released. So, because that's the purpose of our whole cycle, to release an egg, find a man, and get pregnant. It's when we're like, our self confidence is highest, right? That's when I always say, like, this is when you should negotiate contracts and money and stuff. So, when we basically go out, it's summer season, we don't want to spend time inside, we want to go to a barbecue, to the lake, we want to be around, chat with people, connect with people. So that's the ovulatory phase, and then it kind of dies down into your fall phase, where we're like, oh, we forgot to do all those things, now we need to catch up, clean up, sort things, clean the house, start taking care of the bills. So it's basically all the detailed kind of work that doesn't require us to come up with new plans. I don't know if there's lots of women out there that plan on the first of the month, and sometimes that doesn't work. It doesn't work if you're not in your planner phase, in your spring phase. but maybe in your fall phase or even in your menstrual phase, then of course, planning ahead, that's not what your body is supposed to do right now. So, which means figure out what's your baseline, how much energy do you have in the different phases, what kind of work works easiest. Because that's also a problem, right? We have the same kind of to-dos, and some days they go easy, and some days we're like beating ourselves up for not getting them done. So figure out what of your to-do list you should be doing in which phase because it's easiest.
So, what we're kind of saying is, although there are these standards, it very much comes down to our responsibility and I guess recording how we feel in these different phases.
Yeah, if we can't track it, then we don't know what's going on, right? We need this awareness first. How do I work? And not like just follow some random Instagram or YouTube dude, bro. Because I think that's the problem with a lot of programs out there. It's like, this is how I do it, this is how it works for me. But then you'll start doing it and you get frustrated because it doesn't work for you. But no one tells you you'll have to figure out what works for you or not.
And is that, and you help women do that in terms of that first phase
Yes.
mapping?
So first, it's like figure out how you work, record it. It's basically like a cycle tracker on steroids for your business. And then you assign it points, right? You can assign it on a scale from 1 to 10. How well do I feel today? What's my mood? What's my energy? And then what thing worked and what didn't work very well. And nowadays you can make a million notes and then just drop them into ChatGPT and say, like, can you find a pattern? Can you tell me, even ChatGPT knows about cycle syncing, like what do you think I should try next? Right?
And I guess it's based on that scientific, your scientific background of experimentation
Yeah.
and changing variables in terms of understanding where women are today. So how does that hormonal rhythm influence how women can plan and work and lead? What does it look like in everyday life?
In everyday life. So the first thing every woman should have is their cycle in their calendar, right? We have everyone's birthday in there. We have all our meetings in there. We have all our children's stuff in there, but we don't at first glance see which cycle phase are we going to be in when we're actually finding an empty slot to have a conversation or a meeting. So I think that's the first thing. So you need to know yourself and your cycle and put it in there.
Just quickly on that, I remember, and obviously I'm postmenopausal now, but this is just a fascinating area. But I remember I used to go through my cycle, and my cycle was one that didn't really bother me. I didn't have any huge issues with my periods or anything like that. But I always remember I would do things like, I'm not a sweet tooth, devour a whole pack of biscuits and have no explanation for it because I was so divorced from my own cycle. And then 2 days later or 3 days later, my period would start and it'd be like, oh, yes, that's why. And now that you say it, why didn't I have those things? Your period is due on this date or due on this date. Actually, in my calendar, it seems crazy that we're so divorced from ourselves that we don't think it's important enough to note.
Well, it's not just when am I expecting my next period. It's also like when are those 7 to 10 days when I really have extra energy? When is those 4 or 5 days when I really go out and connect with people or I'm like my most self-conscious person, confident to go out there to help you just make better decisions.
And I
But
guess that's what you call the rhythmic productivity side.
yeah, because I heard from a lot of women that they'll make appointments with like all sorts of people, and then they find themselves on that day where they don't feel well and they cancel it. I was like, well, yeah, if you have your cycle in there, you can be like, okay, that's not a good day. And you don't need to tell anyone why this is not a good day, right? It's just like, no, that day doesn't work for me. So actually, that's in my calendar too. I have like no calls kind of thing. And you can put it in your calendar and then Calendly is like, oh, she already has an appointment in there.
Yes.
So it doesn't show up in any of my bookings. You can't book me in those couple of days. And that's just, before forcing myself and pushing myself through there. I'll just double up on the other days.
I'm going to ask you something, maybe it's more personally related now, or for all of those women who are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, do we still have cycles?
I do think so. I think there is also not a lot of scientific studies on it. But I do think that women have just been evolutionary made into having those cycles. And even if you don't feel it, you can always make one, right? Use like the moon phases, or the first week of each month, I'm doing this, and the second, I'm doing that. So
Again,
maybe
based on tracking how you feel, because I spent, last week, I think the full moon was on the Wednesday. And the number of things that I hear from women all the time is, oh, I couldn't sleep. I didn't get a good night's sleep. And then it's full moon. Or the fact that we as women have a natural affinity to the moon and its cycles. I don't know what it is. I speak to a lot of women and they are all very conscious of the moon, whichever age they are.
so. I think there has been a study out there that looked at uh, women in the Stone Ages or something, and how their cycle most likely worked. And they found that most likely all the women had their um, ovulation around the full moon, because then you see people outside even at night, right? And then their periods around the new moon, when it's like it's dark anyway, we can sit in our uh, huts or caves or whatever. And I don't know if that's true, but it at least would align with that whole we go with the moon. And I think there's a lot of women who say they also cycle with the moon. But I think there's so much artificial light now that our body doesn't take the cue from the moon anymore. So maybe there is a connection, right, with the moonlight affecting our cycle. And now we just have lights everywhere that it doesn't work anymore.
But again, it's interesting to say there isn't enough research done in general, but there's not enough research done then on menopausal women to see whether they still have this kind of cyclical feeling, even if it's not driven by hormonal change in the same way.
No, because they usually die like right like 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Women would just be not don't bother with people in menopause or postmenopause because they'll die anyway.
They'll die. They're not childbearing anymore. They don't
Yeah,
matter.
but now women get older and older, so it becomes an issue.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back into what you focus on. So you focus on women in leadership positions, correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
basically, women who run their own business, who have to do it all. And if you have a job that you get a paycheck every month, then yeah, sure, you can afford like those 2 or 3 days where you're like, okay, I pretend to be working. But if you work for yourself, then it's getting really hard to pretend you're working without punishing yourself for not doing anything. Uh, and obviously, it also, the way your cycle affects you also has implications on how you deal with your team, how you lead your team, when you should have what sort of conversations with your team.
In terms of this sort of leadership position and resilience and rhythm, what do you wish more women knew about the relationship between their biology and, for example, burnout or how they operate day to day?
So I think the first thing we need to know is that most of those productivity hacks, they have been made for the linear male cycle or rhythm. They don't have a cycle. It's more or less linear. I mean, if you ask the guys, they will all tell you that they have, mood and energy dips,
Of
but I don't
course.
think it's compared to like the monthly cycle of a woman. And it is a cycle. So if we try to live it linearly, then that's how we burn out, right? Because we don't integrate rest. I always say rest is part of your strategy. You need to have it in your calendar. Like your laptop can't run on an empty battery, your phone can't run on an empty battery, your car can't run on an empty battery. So how do you expect yourself to run on an empty battery? That's one thing. And you're allowed to say like not today. Like no is a full sentence. Say,
But as you say, when you're working for yourself, actually understanding these things and making sure that they happen can be really hard. I know, for me, this advice sounds, yep, of course. But it's that thing of very good at giving advice to everybody else because you know the structure of it. How well do you incorporate this into how you operate your business?
So it definitely affects when I do certain things. Like, when do I write things? When do I implement systems? Right? I kind of schedule that. Obviously, you can't schedule everything based on your cycle. So then and this is a step-by-step process. It's not all at once. It's like, okay, I need to have that meeting in my menstrual phase. I know it's gonna suck and I know I don't want to do it, but then what can you do to hype yourself up to actually do it? And what do you plan around it to, take the extra rest that you need that day? So it's more like a toolbox of strategies.
Okay. And so, what are some of the changes that you experience with women who work with you or they experience? And what does having you as their coach with the Cyclical CEO mean to them?
So first of all, if you do the majority of the things you need to do when they're easy, you can save a lot of time, right? You see more results in a shorter time, so you don't need to do extra long overtime hours. You can schedule other things around, and I think you don't beat yourself up because you understand yourself better. So I know that in my luteal phase, I cannot work, until like 5 or 6 p.m. But I know I can pre-work in my follicular phase and basically already fill the cup with work wise. So I can enjoy the time off in my luteal phase
Without feeling guilty?
without feeling guilty and enjoy, like, that's when we prep our surroundings. So that's when I like cooking, when I like going out. It's not like unproductive, it's just a different kind of productivity.
So, how long do women work with you for? What would a schedule be like in terms of the process you would go through with them?
So first we do an audit, like, right, where are you? What's your goal? I don't think anyone should work with anyone if they don't clearly discuss what the goal is. And then we'll take into consideration the family. Some women have families, some don't. And then identify the small steps first in their own routine and in their working routine. And then on top of that, we also can build like little automations, like all the stuff that we repeat and that we dread and don't want to do. We can actually figure out, like, how do we set up a system that makes the majority of the work for you.
So it's a really nice link between who we are individually as women and how we can make that work for us better in these roles of leadership or in these roles of being the CEO of our own businesses. Because I love the way you're bringing in, on one point, we're looking at hormones and how they work. And on the other side, you're adding that to automations and saying that there's this world of bringing together both systems and biology.
Yeah, well, if we do everything, like if we have to do everything by ourselves, right? Or have only a very small team, then there's gonna be things that we don't like to do, that we don't want to spend a lot of time on. So let's build a system that we have to spend the least amount of time on for making it work.
And it makes so much sense. I think often we feel what we're doing, but not we don't take that step back and say, what is it that I'm doing and spending time on that I probably don't enjoy or is taking too much of my time? How can that be an automated process within what we do? And I guess does women's a lot of women don't describe themselves as being technical or don't describe themselves of having that side of planning to understand the automations that are out there. Is that the kind of thing that you'd be able to help women do, identify what can be automated and how to automate it?
Yeah, so I started with this 1 hour, 90-minute masterclass where you get my whole system. And it actually leads you from tracking your own rhythm and figuring out what your own rhythm is to like planning your big moves with, like, let's get rid of the to-do list for now and just figure out how to uh, basically plan the month with our energy peaks. And then it basically gets you to the point where you realize I can't do everything in one cycle. And that's okay. I think there's too much noise out there that tells us we need to get everything done right now, instead of teaching us like, okay, we should be a little bit long-term planning, because a lot of the to-dos that we're doing is because someone else expects us to do that, or we think that someone else expects us to do
Yes.
it. And
Yes.
if we figure out that maybe half of them we don't need to do, then we can just drop them. So it helps plan your work, your business, and then also helps with identifying the first automations. And
So
automation doesn't need to be like this elaborate, oh, I have like my computer to do everything. But it's like, okay, what is the repeating question people ask? Why don't I make an FAQ list that I feed into ChatGPT so he knows all the answers? And then I'll just dump in the email and say like, draft me a response. I'll read the response, which takes like 2 minutes, say like, and this is not good, but the rest, like 95% of the email will be, you know, good enough to be sent out.
Yep. And it takes time to draft a good email. It's so having any help that we can and understanding how to help it work for us better, I think, is really, really essential. So you mentioned this longer session that you do, and you're running one this evening. Is that the base of the one that you are running this evening, or is
Yes.
that okay?
So
So
that's tonight, because I realized I'm much better in recording things in a room with other people than in front of a phone camera.
I
So
hate.
that's why we're doing this. It's a test, and everyone is welcome to join for a discount, obviously, because it's not the final product yet.
And so the course is really, I guess, or this evening session is about women who want to, a strategy session, who want to scale their businesses or move forward in what they're doing without sort of that burnout or without that additional feeling of pressure.
Yes, for everyone who maybe has heard about cycle thinking and that it could work in their business and help them, but have no idea how to get there. So it's basically a walkthrough like, this is what you track for like 1 minute a day. I promise it's not more than a minute a day where you have to write down things. And then after 1 month, you should already see where your patterns are, and then how to use that natural energy to plan. And we're going to go through like, what does that mean for my launch? Like all the different tasks that you can do in a launch, like which phase would they go in? What about social media? Because I bet everyone was like, oh, I have 10 ideas for like reels and Instagram posts. Let me just write them down. And then it's like, okay, but now the captions, when do I write the captions? And then let's post them all. Like I know that from myself. Like now I have 5 what I think is good posts. Let's just throw them out there. Instead of like, okay, I have 5 posts. Let's see how we spread them out until I'm back at the I easily get 5 posts in like one good session.
Okay. So we're talking about planning, and this is the monthly planning that we're doing based on that cycle. How does our planning for a year, for example, take into account these different seasons that we have? Because you mentioned, autumn and winter and what those do. How does that help us with our longer term planning?
So if you have your cycle seasons, right? So every month you have a winter, spring, summer, fall season. And then I think we're also very aware of this seasonal energies. So then they amplify our monthly planning, right? So a menstrual phase in winter might feel darker or even low energy than one in summer. While in summer, your ovulatory phase might be like amplified and you can go out and talk to 10 people, and in winter, maybe only 1 or 2. So that's something we should consider. Maybe we don't have the same energy in every phase every month. And also, like, what are our obligations?
Yeah.
Like, how much time do you really have in December to do all the work that you think you're going to be doing? Or is really 2 weeks of December already out of the planning because you're doing family, you're doing holidays, you're traveling?
Which makes it much more easy to enjoy those times, I think, because whenever I've been able to do that and stop and planned that time in, it's so much less stressful to actually walk away from work and take that time rather than continually thinking, especially as a business owner, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, I know I don't get work done between, Christmas, like December the 18th or whatever, and like January the 3rd. So why do we even plan work?
Which sounds really logical. It sounds really logical, but as I said, I think it's funny how you look at women and their to-do lists, and women can write a to-do list, with all the unplanned things, unpaid labor, all the other things that we do, but then actually being able to look at it and say, "What is actually essential for me to do?" There are a lot of nice to haves. There's a lot of things I could do if I was superwoman and therefore could, divide myself into triplicate, but what's realistic about what we have to do on those lists? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of women have difficulty even finding those priorities. It's like we should be doing everything. So if you were to go back to that moment where you kind of stepped out of science into this new path, what have you learnt along the way that you would tell yourself back then?
That I have no idea how business works. So you don't get anything of that taught as a scientist, it's like, how does a business work? I think I took a lot of time to figure that out along the way, and it would have been so much nicer to not have to worry about finding it out, and also, like, maybe have an idea. I mean, in my case, it was like my contract ended, and I had, like, this 1 year of unemployment, financed, but yeah, it doesn't work as well sometimes as you think it would money-wise. So have a plan.
Again, comes back down to planning. So if you were going to give women advice now, what's the one piece of advice that you think that every woman should follow and why?
So know your cycle because it is also a health indicator, right? So it's the first thing every month that tells you what might be off. And then have a toolbox full of things that work for you, right? That's how you rest, how you get your energy up, stop relying on coffee and overtime. Uh, identify the things that burn you out and replace them with something that lifts you up.
So, a couple more questions. One, let's just talk about the session you're hosting later this evening, because I think it's going to be the first of maybe more that you do. So, just tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's the business rhythm blueprint. It's for everyone who wants to use their cycle to help them run their business, but who has no idea how to start, where to start, and how to actually start tackling it. So I use Airtable. It's basically Google Sheets, but better. And you get an easy system where you just have to tab a few things to find your own rhythm. It tells you how to plan your things, right? Your next month, your next 3 months with your cycle. It also hints a little bit about what you can automate. So I'll show you a little bit of my things that I automated in the last few months and how that all, like how women don't grow in circles because that, right, a cycle is a circle, but we actually grow in spirals. So
Hmm.
we'll go up a little bit further every month. And yeah, it's just the first step you'll take if you want to start working with your biological rhythm. And you don't have to know anything about biology to do it.
I love that. I think it's so important that we come to know ourselves better, just day to day, and these little things that we can have in our toolbox to help us are so important for us. So, anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Time has gone so quickly, as always.
And what I want to share, I'll repeat it again, like rest is part of your strategy, right? Put that in your calendar or on your mirror or anywhere, but we need to have those rest days. And I'll tell you a story. Like when I started this whole cycle tracking thing, I had those, I probably always had those days where I like sat on my couch, had my breakfast, and then like I don't feel like doing anything. right? So what I want to do is like sit on my couch and binge watch something. And then when I work for myself, I gave myself the permission to do it, but would be there like beating myself up because I should be working. And then I gave myself the permission. I was like, you know what? If you give yourself the permission to binge watch at 10 in the morning, like give yourself the permission to enjoy it. And that actually, so it gets better. You see results in like one cycle, but you need a couple more to actually see it. So now I know exactly it's like 3 days before my period starts. And if I give myself the permission, then I can start working after lunch again. And last month I was like completely missing that day. I was like, it should have been today, but I feel like pretty good actually. So it's like we have those cues that our body actually gives us. And
And keeping the score with our bodies. I mean, again, as you're saying it, that the more I guess you learn to listen to it and work with its flows, the less sharp maybe some of these transitions
yeah,
become. So
yeah.
that's why it's also so important, because it's moving forward in terms of energy as well. I love that thing that rest is part of our strategy. It's definitely one that I'm going to write down and put on my mirror. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom with us. It's really been great to get to know the person who you are behind sort of the job titles and how you're applying your scientific knowledge to the science of who we are as a woman. If you missed any part of today's conversation, the full replay will be available on the Womanship platform and on our website. So thank you so much, Julia, for joining us today. And obviously you can reach out to Julia for events on the platform as well and check out her event this evening. Hopefully we'll see some of you there. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.